My mother was a solicitor and she worked in Uri. She was one of the first women in Northern Ireland to set up her own practice. I went to primary school quite near her place of work, and so after school I would go down to the office and I suppose play there before I went home with her. And at that age I was a thumb sucker and I would feel ears, so I used to stand beside her and feel her ear while she was giving advice to clients. So I don't know if it looked terribly professional, but I think her theory was that you shouldn't have a very demarcated family and professional life. So I went to a primary school in Uri, and it was a state primary school, and that was basically in South Down, and they were moving to North Down. So I suppose my parents decided that I would be going to boarding school. And so I suppose I went to a much more educationally focused secondary school. It was an all-girls school and I boarded Monday to Friday. Certainly when I was very young, the troubles to me were sort of like an alphabet mix. You had the IRA, the UVF, the RUC, and I suppose during my childhood, getting checked when you went into shopping centres and having general security and around and about was really quite normal. I didn't consider it unusual or strange. It wasn't until I started studying really in London that I obviously appreciated the difference, but I suppose what's more than that, a lot of people, I guess, that I came into contact when I was in London didn't have those experiences, and I suppose I thought in many respects they were maybe more light-hearted or something than me or people of my generation. And so that actually was extremely, I suppose, enlightening and quite pleasant. My heart was really at home, and I knew that that's always where I would come back. So ultimately I decided to qualify in Dublin because I wasn't quite ready to come home. It was good for me, I think, because it was an exposure, I suppose, to another system, which wasn't terribly different really, I suppose, to what I'd experienced before. Yeah, I did, when I was working in Dublin, work in I suppose, a relatively small commercial practice, kind of ironically really, and did liquor licensing and commercial conveyancing basically. But when I finished my time there, I was really ready to come home again. It's not a given that just because your mother works in the practice that you will be made partner or anything of that nature. You have to, I suppose, show your willingness to work hard and all of that. Initially, the work that I did was really criminal work and some family work. And I suppose as the years went on, I suppose I do really more commercial and conveyancing and I suppose what other lawyers and bigger practices would call private client work. The impact of becoming president of the Law Society was quite significant insofar as I had to occupy a public role, and I hadn't particularly done that before. I was relatively used to being in court and making court appearances and I suppose doing my job as a lawyer, but occupying a public space is quite a different thing. And so it ranged, I suppose, from effectively speech making skills to media presentation to talking to groups, etc. And all of that was effectively new and interesting to me. I I was very conscious that I was following in my mother's footsteps, not least because I think we're the first mother-daughter duo, but also because a lot of people of her generation are obviously still working and would have remembered her, and you know, so I was very conscious that I didn't want to, you know, let the family down or anything like that. When my mother was a young solicitor, I think her experience initially was really, you know, in terrorist trials effectively, and you know, in those days a lot of the trials were heard in Belfast, because essentially the Diplock courts were in place, but for security reasons much of those trials were in Belfast. So, you know, that is something entirely different to the experience that I have had. Really, I haven't been involved, thankfully, in any terrorist trials, and didn't have to, I suppose, face or sustain those sort of issues, if you like. I don't think it would be accurate to say that as a society we are where we need to be. There's still much of a distance to go, but I'm pleased that, you know, there is not sectarian violence as such of the wholesale nature that happened during her period of working life, if you like. I mean, as president, I didn't have to deal with solicitors or lawyers or judges being under threat, and I suppose that should be how it is, really.